All right, we are back. Look at that dragon. Man, it is not a fantasy RPG book if you do not have a ferocious looking dragon here. Oh, from the draft. Okay. All right, Hero Dragon. Yep, it is very tasty. Very tasty. It may be the Sam's Club sort of like bulk generic sliced provolone, but it is still good stuff. All right, so as we have discovered here in Castles and Crusades, a lot of the terminology, a lot of the sentiment is similar to what you've seen in D&D. You've played D&D. There are some differences, right? Just like there would be if you're going from D&D into Pathfinder. But so far, nothing has been very onerous. And you might say, well, we haven't talked about skills. We also haven't talked about feats. Because I didn't go over, racial abilities, or I didn't go over the particular classes. Could it be there? Could be. But let's continue to look at the general rules that I can't really say all must abide by, because these are guidelines. Remember, rule number 1 in Castles and Crusades, change something if you need to. Mix it up. But let's take a look at this gorgeous art here. The our brave knight may have to reprioritize what the heck is going on here. But at least the wizard, and maybe this is an assassin character. At least these two are on it. As this dragon is just burning and making its way over to the horde. But gorgeous art, very expressive. It tells a story, or at least gets you to go, huh. I wonder if I can have a scene like that in my game. Now, I also wonder, because look, this, having commissioned a lot of art in my day, none of this is especially an accident. And so as I look at this, is this was this a scene from perhaps one of the creators' games where a dragon got the drop on the party, or that this is a tale that was submitted to them by by a fan or someone else? I wonder what was the compositional story to this piece. Because it's beautiful, it's vibrant, it shows action and a lot of things. But this is what I wonder about when I see fantasy art. Because presumably there was some kind of art direction being taken, right? Yeah, Iron Chef Lord, who put the wizard up front? Rolled low on perception and initiative. But of course, what if the story is, because we have some cobwebs here. This treasure might have been abandoned, or it looked abandoned anyway. And suddenly, because the game does talk about how powerful illusions are. What if this actually was the case, that the dragon lured the party into its lair and then was able to just appear because the illusion wore off, or was whatever, like desummoned or whatever, right? But these are just the fun circumstances that can come to mind. Both IRL, like, was this actually a scene in someone's game? Or that might explain why the wizard is up front, because the wizard was actually the one in the back. It's just that the back quickly turned to the front. The back quickly turned to the front, and hopefully they'll be able to make it. All right, anyway. The Castle Keeper in the game. Remember, Castle Keeper is Dungeon Master, Game Master, Storyteller, etc. Before embarking upon the road of adventure, it is necessary that you, the Castle Keeper, decide what type of game to play. Doing this takes some modicum of preparation, and a number of factors have to be considered. Shall the game be an epic campaign lasting for years of play, or shall it be a night's adventure? Is glory or gold or both to be the adventurer's reward? What is to be the mood, tone, and pace of the game? What style the game takes depends largely, but not wholly, upon you. It is incumbent upon the Castle Keeper to create an environment within which the players will have fun. The players must become involved in the game, immersing themselves in the moment, so it plays out like a rousing adventure movie or exciting book. Is the style of the game hack and slash, high fantasy, or grim realism? Is it an epic campaign where the characters set themselves on a resolute path to save the world? Or the more simple fare where they plunge themselves into dungeon crawls, fighting for slaughter and plunder? Setting and theme, pace and mood are as important as the style and type of game. Mastering these elements may take time and a keen perception for what the players want, but once mastered, you can capture your audience and keep them enthralled through night after night of role-playing. Combined in just the right mix, these elements establish a depth of fun and excitement that all players want to experience and every Castle Keeper wants to achieve. By paying careful attention to all these elements, you can turn an evening's play into a war story or heroic escapade that your gaming group talks about for years to come. The following section briefly examines these elements and offers you some advice. I think I'll touch on the discussions of the style and mood when we get to that part of the workshop. As it's describing role-playing maybe to people who don't have a lot of experience in it, or maybe through a particular lens of Castles and Crusades. I'm looking for the rules right now. This is important info, but this is not the type of ruling or set of rules I'm looking for here. Planned. All right. Combat. You know what NPCs are, and if you don't, you can ask in chat now in Twitch. You can ask in YouTube comments later, and we can describe what NPCs are. Yes. But we do come back to this. With an iron thumb, rules. Whatever the style, theme, setting, or plot of the game, the Castle Keeper should be willing to adjust the game's mechanics when necessary. A well-balanced rule system is important in that it creates a median upon which all encounters and conflicts can be resolved. However, rules should not impede the flow of the game or the enjoyment of the players. The Castle Keeper, who works to create a fast-paced combat, wherein the players are anxious for each round to resolve to learn their fates, can find the momentum shattered by a rule set which is, as often as not, unnecessary. The Castle Keeper must learn to adjudicate the game and to decide quickly what the ramifications of certain actions may be. For instance, Dolgan, the last standing member of a 5-character party, is hard-pressed by a mountain of orcs pouring down a corridor. They are led by a huge beast of an ogre. Dolgan wants to shatter the enemy's resolve and save his comrades. To do so, he knows he must slay their leader. After relaying this, the Castle Keeper should make a quick mental note of what it is going to take to hit the creature and go with it, rather than checking tomes of books for an answer. Success or failure is met by the roll of a dice, but the pace of the game is left uninterrupted. Rules are tools and should be used only when they are necessary. Castle keepers and players should not shy away from amending, customizing, or even ignoring the rules to best fit the needs of the game and its particular narrative. The ultimate example of when to use rules and how to customize the game is found in the many varied choices of character creation. Castle keepers may wish to alter the basic method of rolling attributes explained in the character creation section of the rules so that characters are more reflective of the campaign world in which the game is placed. A castle keeper may need characters with higher attributes when running a high fantasy or theatrical game, whereas a more realistic game might necessitate lower average attribute scores. There are several alternative methods for generating attribute scores. Thus, consult the Castle Keeper's Guide, so another book, for new methods and their various advantages and disadvantages. Customizing your game should not be restricted to the above. Ability or attribute checks can also be changed or amended. It is not necessary for every conflict resolution or obstacle to be overcome by the use of dice. Adequate rules are given in the next section to cover almost any incident, but the use of rules should be sparing and only in those moments in which they are applicable. It is important to keep the element of chance and consistency in action in any given encounter or game, but it is equally important to maintain the flow of the story. So bending the rules and using them judiciously is a necessity for playing a well-run game. Do not shy away from this, nor shy away from adding rules to the game. Familiarity is a must, so be sure to read and understand the following sections so that a better game can be had by all those who sit at the table with expectations of an adventure and a rousing good time. Hi, Uriance. Yep, Castle Keeper Guide is like the DMG. That would be more like Castle Keeper's Guide. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. Aha! So these are other rules and considerations. There's more here. I'm not going to get into this book tonight. Maybe we can delve into it. It does talk on expanding characters and more magic and other things here. Not going to worry about it right now. But we can address it. I want to stick to the player's handbook. There's other things. Here's the tables for various things. If you do like tables, you want random generation or quick references to things. So there's a lot here. Remember, there's the quick start that is over in our Discord. We also have there's the character sheet that we can use to fill in when we make our characters as well. Monsters and treasure. Oh, there's some familiar looking things here. Ooh, some super familiar looking things here. Love the art. Really, really solid. Anyway, a lot of things, right? Okay. We'll come back to the things after we read the stuff. The rules are your servant, not your master. All games have rules. Rules make a game playable. Rules are a set of guidelines offering the regulation of game activities in a manner that is understood by all. A format for their consistent application so everyone knows what to expect, and a method for their fair and balanced adjudication of those activities from game to game and place to place. Rules are indispensable, but if they are too rigorously imposed, on the other hand, rules can constrain and limit the deeds and exploits imagined by the players and the castle keeper. Castles and Crusades is very much a game that takes place in the imagination of the players. Hi, Heretic Trance, welcome. The characters, events, settings, and creatures are mythical and fabulous. They are constructed and designed in the mind's eye and not on the graphs and diagrams of a banal reality. For a game of Castles and Crusades to be truly successful, the rules must bend to the desires and needs of the imagination. To do otherwise is to encumber and restrain the potential of both players and game, and is wholly at odds with the desired results of a game of Castles and Crusades. So, it is only fitting that before delving further into the rules and mechanics for running a game of C&C, it must first be said that the rules are the servant of the game, not its master. These rules are designed to be amended, changed, adjusted, added to, and customized in order to best serve the wants of its players' desires and needs. The Castle Keeper and players are encouraged to consult with one another and make decisions concerning changes or amendments to the rules provided in this book. This can only make the game better. That is not to say that this should be undertaken with complete abandon or whimsy. Rather, as the game develops, the players and the individual running the games should consult and offer ideas for changes or amendments, experiment with them, and decide collectively which adjustments are necessary and beneficial to the overall needs of the game. Also, bear in mind, some discretion should be used in changing, adding, or removing rules. Balancing the various abilities and capabilities of the characters against the innumerable obstacles is difficult, as the game must always remain challenging to be exciting. An unbalanced game can be just as disastrous as a game laden with too many rules. In all, the rules should ignite the fires of the imagination, and the changes should be the fuel that keeps it burning. Bend the rules, change them, amend them, do whatever is necessary to make your game more enjoyable. This set of rules is your servant, not your master. Do we feel way less pressure now? Do we feel less pressure in exploring a new system? That same philosophy, I mean, there are games that are like, no, these are the rules. But it's still your game at your table. And unless for some reason the creator of the game is over your shoulder and, policing your words and your actions and your maps and your characters and everything else, this only continues to reinforce enjoy your game. All right, attributes and the game. Throughout the game, the Castle Keeper and players must resolve whether or not specific actions succeed or fail. These actions might include tracking a band of goblins, detecting a trap, swimming a mighty river, or resisting the effects of a giant snake's poison. To resolve these situations, the Castle Keeper informs the player to make a specific attribute check: strength, dexterity, constitution, charisma, wisdom, or intelligence. The player rolls a d20 and adds the character's level and the attribute modifier of the attribute designated by the Castle Keeper. If the total score equals or exceeds, so equal or exceed, the challenge class, that number representing the difficulty of conflict requiring the check, the character succeeds. If it fails to equal or exceed it, the check fails. This simple attribute check mechanic for resolving conflicts underlies the whole game and is called the Siege Engine. The name Siege Engine reflects the attribute check because all conflicts in Castles and Crusades involve an attacker and a defender, just as if an army were laying siege to a castle's walls. The Siege Engine mirrors the game's story-based theme of characters seeking to overcome the challenges before them. Now, this sounds a lot like when we were approaching the system. And if you go, well, wait, so aren't there skills? Aren't there? Is it just that easy of choosing an attribute and rolling a d20 with whatever particular modifier? Meet or beat, and there you go? Could it be that easy? Find out next time. And by that, let's continue to read. Determine if a check is necessary. It is important to note that only those activities which have a significant chance of failure as determined by the castle keeper should be resolved by a dice roll. In most cases, narrative development and not chance should guide the game. Judicious use of the attribute check is essential to maintaining the fast flow of action and adventure. There are instances in which the attribute check is required. These include all class ability checks and saving throws, and those other instances where the castle keeper deems a check necessary to resolve a conflict. Once it is decided an attribute check is needed, the castle keeper must identify the attribute to be checked against. In most cases, the answer is obvious. In the case of class abilities and saving throws, the appropriate attribute has already been identified. With class abilities, the associated attribute is in the ability's description. For example, when Melf, the rogue, picks a pocket, a dexterity attribute check must be made to determine success. Saving throws, which are discussed below, list their associated attribute. Non-specified situations requiring a check are typically easy to resolve. The attribute descriptions located at the beginning of the book, we checked in on those, should aid in deciding which attribute to associate with specific actions. For example, Bjorn attempts to push a statue over onto the kobold war chief Krublet. The statue is exceedingly heavy, even for the great Bjorn. The castle keeper might require an attribute check against Bjorn's strength. When an attribute check is needed, you must determine the challenge class. Once the associated attribute is chosen, the castle keeper must calculate the character's chance of success. The chance of success is determined by a number called the challenge class. The challenge class mirrors armor class in that to succeed, the attribute check must be greater than or equal to the challenge class. To determine the challenge class, two simple steps are required. The castle keeper must determine the challenge base and the challenge level, the level of difficulty of the challenge involved. Now, what is the challenge base? The first step in calculating challenge class is to determine the challenge base. The challenge base is always either a 12 or an 18. Challenge base is dependent on whether or not the attribute being checked against is the character's prime attribute or secondary attribute. If the attribute is prime, the challenge base is 12. Now, it's in its own way in D&D, it's kind of advantage and disadvantage. As statistically, advantage is +5 to a roll. Disadvantage is -5 to a roll. Now, in this case, the difference is 6. But if you can memorize advantage and disadvantage, then understanding that if it's a strength you have, it may not be strength itself, but if the strength you have, the base is 12 because you're better at it than an attribute that you are not as well-rounded in, right? Not as good at, right? Returning to our example, Bjorn the Fighter has a Strength Prime attribute. Thus, the challenge base for his action would be 12. If Bjorn were a wizard, and Strength was a secondary attribute, his challenge base would be 18. So far, so good, right? The second step in calculating challenge class is determining the conflict's challenge level. The castle keeper has vast discretion in determining challenge level. Although the task sounds difficult, it is actually fairly easy. Challenge level is nothing more than the level of difficulty of the action attempted or the reaction made. The simplest way to determine challenge level is by referencing the level or hit dice of the non-player character or monster to which the character is making the check against, or is acting against, or reacting to. In such cases, challenge level is equal to the level or hit dice of the non-player character or monster involved. A monster's CL is equal to its hit dice. A spell's challenge level, CL, is equal to the level or hit dice of its caster. A trap's challenge level is equal to the level of the person who set it. For instance, if an 8 hit dice creature uses a paralyzing gaze ability on a character, the challenge level would be 8. If a 6th level wizard casts a spell on a character for which a saving throw is allowed, the challenge level would be 6. If a rogue attempts to deactivate a trap set by a 4th level rogue, the challenge level would be 4. There are more arbitrary situations that require the castle keeper to create an adequate challenge level. If a character is attempting a task such as making an extraordinary jump or swinging on a rope to grab an object, the castle keeper needs to assign a difficulty to the task. A good way to assign such a challenge level is to think of the task's difficulty as if it were a monster, and then assign a challenge level equal to its hit dice of the monster imagined. In this way, a level or hit dice can be assigned tasks such as swimming a river, knocking down a door, jumping a pit, or catching a falling object. For example, a character might wish to jump over a 6-foot wide pit. Assuming the character is unarmored and has room to run and jump, this is a fairly easy task that is perhaps equivalent to the degree of difficulty involved in a first-level fighter combating a one-hit die monster. Thus, the castle keeper assigns a challenge level of 1. However, if the character is heavily weighted down, leaping across the space could be deemed 2 or higher. Now you see where you're empowered for this and where you have to make a call on the fly. And if you start going, I don't know about that, I play D&D and it gives me also the chance to make arbitrary DCs. There are some that are like a scaling, like a hard fast DC, right? Usually 8 as the base. If you're like, oh, challenge base, I have to remember a number of a challenge base. Yeah, you have to in D&D as well. It's 8. Plus modifier, plus proficiency. This is kind of, in a sense, the difference of proficiency. Because you don't get that number if you're not proficient, right? Oh, I'm being tricksy. I'm a tricksy hobbitses bringing all this sort of stuff up, right? Because how many of you have played in a game of D&D and you as the DM, or you know that your DM just said, you know what? A 14 seems good. Can you beat a DC, a difficulty class? Can you beat a DC 14? You can do that here too. Do you have to memorize every single monster in the book to be able to do this? No. Can you get a feeling for the game and make calls on the fly? Yes, and the book encourages you to do it. As a rule of thumb, a challenge level of 1 to 5 is adequate for easy tasks. For difficult tasks, a challenge level of 6 to 10 works well. For very difficult tasks, a challenge level of 11 to 15 suffices. Heroic actions require a challenge level of 15 to 20, or even higher. When in doubt, err on the low side, since it never hurts a game to have a character succeed in something difficult. After the challenge base and challenge level are determined, the castle keeper adds them together. The sum is the challenge class for the attribute check. The score is the number which the player must beat on the check. Let us return to Bjorn in the following example. Oh, look at the art. Yeah. Yep. Kind of, in a sense, James. It's you don't need to worry about having a whole list of skills, as it boils primarily just down to the attributes. And there could be things that are conditional, or you might get a bonus or for something as you hem and haw and you negotiate um, with the castle keeper. But here we have adventure. We have this raised stone path. The adventurers are walking along. Uh-oh, Pescatios with meatballs in the form of these flying creatures. There we go. All right, so we left Bjorn at wanting to push over a statue, I believe. Let us turn again to the example of Bjorn. He is a 5th level fighter with strength as a prime attribute. His challenge base to topple the statue would be 12. Pushing over that statue is a simple to difficult task, so a challenge level of 4 is assigned to the action. Adding 12 and 4 results in a total challenge class of 16. Therefore, the player must roll a modified 16 or better to push the statue over and onto the kobold. The player makes the attribute check by rolling a d20 and adding Bjorn's level and strength attribute modifier. For this example, let's assume Bjorn's player rolls an 11. Bjorn's level 5 and strength modifier, 16 strength grants a +2, are added to the 11 for a total of 18. This beats the 16 challenge class, so the statue creaks and sways for a moment, then falls on the kobold war chief, squashing it. So in short, the process of the attribute check involves the player rolling a d20 and adding the character's level and the appropriate attribute modifier. That total number must be equal to or greater than the challenge class as determined by the castle keeper. As previously noted, every activity does not require an attribute check. However, circumstances do arise where the castle keeper may want the character to make an attribute check, but have a greater chance to succeed. In other words, they may want a challenge level of 0 or less. This is best resolved by setting the CL at 0 and informing the player that they receive an extra bonus, the amount being dictated by the castle keeper. The CK informs them of the bonus. This extra bonus is in addition to their role, level, and attribute bonus. Alternatively, the CK may assign a negative challenge level to the challenge base. Example: Stark is a 1st level ranger with a 15 dexterity. All rangers have the scale class ability that allows them to climb any quote-unquote climbable surface without a dexterity check. Difficult surfaces require a dexterity check. Stark finds himself in a well. There are handholds between the bricks. However, the bricks are covered in slime. The castle keeper does not want Stark to have an automatic climb chance. However, he wants him to have a much greater chance of getting out of the well. The challenge base is 12 because Stark has dexterity as a prime. The castle keeper sets the challenge level at -4. The challenge base 12 plus CL -4 is 8. Stark rolls a d20. He rolls a 6. He adds his level bonus 1 and his dexterity bonus 1 to come up with an 8. He climbs out of the well. The castle keeper could alternatively set the CL at 0 and given Stark a bonus to his +4 bonus to his roll. Little mistype there, I guess. And given Stark a bonus +4 to his roll. So you have flexibility to narrate what's happening or to consider what are the variables in what is happening in the story. Story. Before concluding, it is recommended that the castle keeper keep the challenge class secret. By keeping it secret, anticipation and the unknown thrill of success or failure is maintained in the game. Simply telling the player that the attribute check is made against a prime attribute or secondary attribute conveys, the last word fell out of my ear, an idea of the base chance of success and allows the player to make the attribute check roll. The player would then convey the total result to the castle keeper without knowing what score is needed to succeed. The castle keeper then narratively describes success or failure. Now, do you have to keep it secret? Would you prefer to announce the challenge class every time? Maybe many of you do in D&D and in other role-playing games. You can here. In this game, what's rule 1? You can modify or change the rules. It's urging you, don't just say the number. Maybe give a hint. You can say it's a primary. It does play into a primary something, but don't just say the number, because then that can take away from the narration and the emotion of the scene, instead of everyone just crowding around a little piece of plastic waiting for a number to show up. Still, it's your table, and you conduct your game in a way that you see fit. One of the challenges of running a game is deciding when and how to use the rules of the game to enhance the gameplay experience. Knowing when and how to use the attribute check to the best advantage will make for a fun and exciting game. Misusing them will cause the game to become bogged down with trivialities. Saving throws and class ability checks are two uses of attribute checks that are self-explanatory. As noted above, the most difficult are those other circumstances requiring a general attribute check to be made. But as we've discovered, if that's the most difficult, all of you can easily play in this system. Additionally, the concept of the primary attribute and secondary attribute plays a role as well. Just because a character has a high score in an attribute does not mean that the character has the ability to use it best. A fighter with a 15 strength, which is a prime attribute, knows better how to utilize their body's strength. Pardon me. Whether through leverage, athletic ability, or training, than does a wizard with a 15 strength that is a secondary attribute. A character with a prime attribute of intelligence is grounded in the real and concrete, and is quite able at the art of deduction. They better separate illusion from not like they better. They better separate illusion from reality. This is true even if the character has only an intelligence score of 11. There may be characters with higher intelligence scores, but as a secondary attribute. Those characters may be quick-witted or smarter, but they do not have the natural aptitude for methodological reasoning. Thus, the less intelligent character with intelligence as a prime attribute may be slower in reasoning, but ultimately the character has a better chance of successfully deducing a situation. Such should be kept in mind in reading the following discussion and examples of attribute checks as they relate to each of the 6 attributes. Bluejoy says, "Well, I don't generally or ever really make a DC known. I will say something like it's a low risk or this will be pretty difficult." So you offer hints similar to what is prompted over here. Hi, Medusa Queen, welcome. It's 2 minutes to midnight. Hang on a second. Do I have any last minute Pokemon Go gifts? No last minute Pokemon Go gifts. My buddy has expired. The day is over. I got all my dots though, I think. All right. I caught it before the midnight rollover. So let's use strength as an example. The strength check should be used sparingly and with a healthy dose of common sense. A boulder weighing over a ton cannot be lifted, even by a character with a strength score of 18. A rock for a sling stone can be lifted by anyone. This extreme example illustrates the potential downside of relying on attribute checks to resolve situations in a game. If done too often, the act of making a check can begin to replace the essential value of common sense when determining the outcome of events. Strength checks are most useful when a character is attempting uh, feats of strength beyond the norm. It often involves a situation where a character is matched against another creature or character, or against a force of nature. Or it might involve a character attempting a physical maneuver of an object that involves more than just lifting. Logmar the Black, a 6th level fighter, is attempting to lift a fallen ship's mast off his boon comrade, while trying to avoid being swept overboard by a raging sea. The Castle Keeper rules that Logmar, with 16 strength, plus 2 modifier, would be able to lift the mast, but an attribute check is needed to determine if Logmar can succeed under the stress of the situation. Logmar's player rolls a d20 and scores a 12. His level and strength modifier are added, giving a total of 20. The challenge base of the check is 12 because Logmar has strength as a prime attribute. The Castle Keeper has determined that the slipperiness of the deck and mast would equate to a challenge level of 8. This calculates to a total challenge class of 20. Because the attribute check equals the challenge class, Logmar succeeds in lifting the mast. If Logmar's strength was 7, the Castle Keeper might decide that lifting the mast was impossible and not even allow an attribute check. Example 2. 2 characters need to swim a raging river. The first character is a halfling barbarian from the desert who has never encountered a large body of water or a raging river. The second character is a human ranger who was raised on the banks of a large river. The halfling cannot swim, but the ranger can. Swimming a river is most closely associated with strength. In this case, the Castle Keeper might decide that the halfling cannot swim the river, or can attempt to swim the river, but at a very difficult to heroic challenge level. Conversely, the Castle Keeper might determine that the ranger can automatically swim the river, or can attempt to swim the river at only a difficult challenge level. Thus, a character's background, or even class or experience from past adventures, can play a role in determining success or failure. So here are other examples for the other 5 here. Hi, Ruler. Good to see you. Thank you for the congrats. Feel free to read the specifics in the examples here for it. I think you get the idea by now, and if not, you can go back and rewatch the VOD on Twitch as long as it's there, or on YouTube later. There will be times when a player will want a character to attempt an action that intrudes in the realm of the class ability of another character class. For example, a fighter might wish to open a lock, or a wizard might attempt to track. It is up to the Castle Keeper to decide if such an action is even possible. In general, it is recommended that a Castle Keeper should disallow a character a chance of success in attempting a non-class ability. If a Castle Keeper, for whatever reason, does allow a character to attempt to use a class ability of another class, then the Siege Engine attribute mechanics changes in one significant way. The character does not add their level to the attribute check roll. Instead, the character rolls a d20 and adds the appropriate attribute modifier only. Example 1. Arak, a 5th level dwarf fighter, attempts to pick a pocket of a 6th level NPC. His dexterity is 13, but it is a secondary attribute. He needs a 24 to succeed. 18 for secondary attribute, plus 6 for the target's level. The Castle Keeper allows the attempt. Arak rolls a 12 on a d20, adding the +1 dexterity modifier for a total of 13. Arak fails. Example 2. Deloria, a 5th level fighter with a 12 dexterity. Dexterity is one of Deloria's prime attributes. She tries to sneak across a squeaky wooden floor without being heard by the sleeping wizard on the other end of the room. She scores 16 on her d20 roll and adds nothing, because 16 does not beat her challenge base of 12 prime plus the challenge level of 5. She causes the floor to squeak and wakes up the wizard. If Deloria were a rogue, she would be able to add her level and would have succeeded at the task with a total of 12. No, Ruler, you're fine. It's the same thing as D&D but different. There you go. There's your elevator pitch. Is there anything it's better at? It strips out the minutia of skills, and it is really just goes back to the core 6 attributes. We haven't gone through all the rules yet. We haven't done any example combats, so I don't really have commentary beyond that. And as I have not played this system myself, I can't give you an acknowledging wink and tell you that yes or no. Easier to learn, and it absolutely encourages you to think on the fly and to adapt what you need to adapt. It is important to note that the abilities of each class have the best results when used only by that class. A rogue can move silently with an absolute absence of sound. A fighter, therefore, should only be able to move very quietly, even with a successful roll. A rogue moving silently in order to sneak up on a guard would not alert that guard with a successful check. However, a fighter moving quietly, even with a successful roll, should still stand a chance of being noticed by the guard. Thus, the Castle Keeper might allow the guard a wisdom check to notice the fighter moving quietly up behind. Then we get into saving throws. Many times during a game, something occurs which requires an attribute check, such as when a dryad attempts to charm a character or a dragon breathes fiery breath upon a character. But the attribute associated with the event that causes the check is unclear. For example, what happens when a wight creeps up on an unsuspecting foe and reaches its hand out to steal some part of a soul? This is called an energy drain, and if successful, the character whose energy is drained loses levels. In this case, the character is being acted on in a potentially harmful manner and must make an attribute check to avoid being harmed. This attribute check is called a saving throw. Often the Castle Keeper or new players are unsure as to which attribute a particular type of attack or event relates. Saving throws clarify this, as many of the more common types of events are examined. In the case of the Wight's energy drain, the saving throw relates to Constitution. A saving throw is simply an attribute check for a character to avoid damage or other unwanted alteration or harm caused by a creature's abilities and/or specific situation or effects. Saving throws are unique only in that the character is being acted on and the attacks or events causing it need clarification. A saving throw is an attribute check. A player rolls a d20 and adds the character's level and the appropriate attribute modifier. If the attribute related to the saving throw is a primary attribute, the challenge base is 12. You got it. If the attribute related to the saving throw is a secondary attribute, the challenge base is 18. Hey, there you go. The Castle Keeper determines the challenge level by such factors as the monster's hit dice, the spellcaster's level, or the level of the trap or poison. The Castle Keeper may also give bonuses or impose penalties due to circumstance and situation. The results of failed saving throws for a particular type are explained below. Monsters, creatures, and NPCs are also often required to make saving throws when reacting to attacks by a character, especially spells cast by wizards, clerics, and druids. Monster saving throws function in the same manner with this caveat. Monsters and creatures have lumped primary and secondary attributes, such that they have either a physical or mental primary. If a monster has a physical primary, then all physical attributes act as the primary, while the mental attributes act as secondary attributes. Goes over the 6 different types, well, I guess 7 with variable, but it gives you some examples of them. Let's see, so charm, confusion. Okay, so it's telling you the saving type here. These are going to come up in the course of a game. I don't want to go over each and every one of them. These are rules, yes, but you can look them up as they come up in the course of a Castles and Crusades game. We're having a wizard's duel. Ah ha ha. All right. I can dig it. Now, how about combat? Hi, Travesty, and hello, GMV. Much of the excitement playing Castles and Crusades occurs during the character's combat with monsters. Whether a knight battling a horde of bloodthirsty orcs, a rogue facing off with a nefarious pirate, or a cleric turning a vampire, combat is often the climax of many role-playing sessions. Combat is also the nexus of many rules in Castles and Crusades. Managing combat is often a challenging affair, as the Castle Keeper must not only know the rules, but must also know how to apply the rules fluidly to maintain a sense of excitement through description and action. To facilitate this, the rules for combat have been kept as simple as possible, with much maneuver room left for the Castle Keeper. The rules are designed to organize the action of combat, yet as the essence of combat is its narrative, they also enable the Castle Keeper to manipulate the rules in support of the narrative. Narrative development is as equally important to the game as any combat's results. The rules of combat and its narrative development is discussed below. Outline of a combat round. When a combat occurs, each participant will want to take action. The most common action will be an attack on a foe, but might also include, for example, drinking a potion or casting a spell. To facilitate when a character or monster can act, combat is broken into a series of time measurements called rounds. Does this sound familiar? Probably. Each participant in a combat generally gets one action each combat round. Each participant acts during the round in an order established by the roll of a d10. This is called initiative. The character with the highest initiative acts first, and each character in turn performs an action until the last character with the lowest initiative roll has acted. If a character attacks during a combat round, the character's player rolls a d20 to determine if the character hits the opponent. If the resulting number plus the character's class bonus to hit, plus any attribute modifiers, is equal to or greater than the opponent's armor class, the character has successfully hit the opponent. A successful hit results in damage to the opponent. Monsters and NPCs follow the same procedure and rules as characters, but the Castle Keeper manages their actions. After all participants have acted once in the combat round, a new round begins. With a furious scream and battle axe in hand, Angthar, a barbarian war chief, charges a goblin scouting near his village. To resolve the combat, Angthar's player rolls initiative for Angthar and the castle keeper rolls initiative for the goblin. Angthar rolls a 7, and the goblin rolls a 4. Thus, Angthar acts first. Uh-oh, this is looking grim here. This is the simulated combat right now, everyone. Angthar, a 5th level barbarian with a 14 strength, attacks the goblin with his battle axe. The player rolls a d20 and the result is 12. Angthar adds his basic attack bonus. You all remember Babs in prior edition? Basic attack bonus, +4, and his strength bonus +1 to get a total attack roll of 17. The goblin's scaly hide imparts an armor class of 12. Angthar's attack roll of 17 exceeds the goblin's armor class of 12. Thus, Angthar has successfully hit the goblin with his battle axe. A battle axe inflicts 1d8 hit points of damage, so Angthar's player rolls a d8 and adds Angthar's strength bonus +1 to the roll. In this example, Angthar rolled a 6 for a total of 7 hit points of damage. The goblin only had 4 hit points, so Angthar has defeated it in one swing of his mighty axe. Does that seem pretty straightforward, pretty standard? If Angthar had only inflicted 2 hit points of damage, the goblin would have survived the attack. It then would get to perform an action, perhaps an attack on Angthar with its wicked curved scimitar. If both Angthar and the goblin survived the first round of combat, then a new combat round would begin, started by a new initiative roll. This sequence would repeat until either Angthar or the goblin were victorious. Different combat terms, look them up. You get actions, as you do. Armor class, attacker, attack, bonus to hit. You can read the specifics there. We're on page 215, going on 216 now. And remember, initiatives are a D10 roll. One combat round is 10 seconds long. During this round, all the characters, monsters, and non-player characters should get a chance to act. Generally, only one action is allowed, such as making a melee attack or casting a spell. The types of actions are discussed ahead. It is important to remember that each round is an abstract measurement. The actions and activities that occur in a round are not meant to take place during specific seconds or segments. It should be viewed as a short range of time during which many things happen, although each character or monster must wait their turn to act as determined by initiative. They do not necessarily act in the same order in a narrative sense. The moment of occurrence is not necessarily equal to the initiative roll. Abstract consideration of the combat round allows for a more fluid and expansive narrative. We're getting to that, survival. Before combat begins, the castle keeper determines if one or the other party is surprised. Surprise is a situation in which the adventuring party happens upon monsters and neither is aware nor expects the other. Surprise establishes who becomes aware first. The group that successfully surprises the other gains a free combat round in which to act. Those that are surprised get no action. After the surprise round, combat proceeds normally. Surprise may involve a situation where two characters or groups are unaware of each other, or a situation where one group is attempting to surprise the other. Before any surprise roll is made, the castle keeper must determines if surprise is possible. A group that is aware of another's presence cannot be surprised. Situations often arise in which one group is not able to surprise another, such as if they have to pass over a hallway strewn with dead leaves that crack and pop when stepped on, thus warning the inhabitants of the room down the hallway. Even in those instances in which surprise is possible, there is always a chance something could go awry and the surprise fails to occur. If a party can be surprised, a wisdom attribute check is made by the individual in the group with the best chance of succeeding at it, or by each member of the group individually. If the check is successful, that party or individual is not surprised. Failure indicates surprise. When two separate parties could be surprised, both groups or individuals in the groups must make the wisdom check. If both groups fail the check, they are both surprised. And nothing occurs as they stare at one another in a moment of stunned silence. Initiative is then rolled as normal. The chances for surprise can be mitigated by many circumstances. If a party is well hidden or camouflaged and awaiting a group of poorly perceptive orcs on a brightly lit road, the castle keeper may decide to penalize the wisdom check for the orcs. In general, the bonus or penalty should remain within a range of -5 to +5, although it might be greater in extraordinary situations. Example: returning to the example of Angthar and the goblin, suppose that Angthar came upon a group of goblins and they were unaware of his presence. He decides to leap off a narrow ledge into the goblins, landing amidst them, raining blows left and right as they scratch and claw to get away from his deadly blade. In such an instance, the castle keeper would roll a wisdom check for the goblins to determine if they were surprised. If surprised, Angthar would get a free round to attack them. If not, Angthar and the goblins would roll initiative and combat would proceed. The order of action in a combat round is determined by an initiative roll. Every creature or character participating in the combat round rolls a d10 to determine their initiative each round. Those with the highest roll take their action first, and the actions of others descend from there. In the case of a tie, the one with the highest dexterity goes first. In the case of equal dexterity, simultaneous action occurs. This method of establishing initiative may seem chaotic at times, especially with large groups of creatures or characters. In those cases, the castle keeper may find it necessary to require a group initiative instead, with the winning party acting before anyone in the opponent party. There is one exception to initiative: when a creature uses a weapon with a reach of greater than 10 feet against an opponent with a weapon with less than a 6-foot reach, or when a large creature is fighting a medium or smaller sized creature. In the first round only, the creature with the longer reach or larger size is allowed to attack first, even if the creature with the shorter reach or smaller size won the initiative roll. This rule only applies if the creature with a shorter reach or smaller creature approaches within 10 feet. Such actions count as the action for that round for the larger creature or the one with the longer weapon. Hi, Woden. Example: Hambone the halfling draws his short sword and charges a gnarly stone giant who just crushed his companion with a mighty oaken club. Screaming in a rage driven by revenge and loss, Hambone leaps forward to attack. Hambone rolls a 9 initiative, and the stone gigante rolls a 3. The stone giant is large and Hambone is small. Thus, when Hambone moves within 10 feet of the stone giant is allowed to swing first, even though Hambone won initiative. The stone giant, mirthless and fearless, sweeps his club around, aiming at Hambone's head. Hambone ducks and dodges as he charges, and the stone giant's massive club glances off Hambone's shoulder, but inflicts no damage. Hambone manages to move in close and slices at the stone giant's leg, slashing a deep gash. It does mix up your strategy, and it keeps the round fresh, because you're not just going, all right, well, my attack miss. All right, well, oh, it's my turn again. All right, I attack, miss. In a combat round, characters can perform a wide variety of actions. Every possible action, however, can be categorized in one of the top 5 These top 5 actions make Castle Keepers furious. Click here to find out what they are. Of the 5 types of actions that may be performed during combat, which all have a chance of failure, the 5 possible actions are attack. Oh, thank you, Travesty. Cast a spell, move, use an ability. And use an item. Non-lethal and multiple actions. There is, of course, another broad category encompassing non-lethal or otherwise mundane actions such as talking, standing still, and doing nothing or picking up an item. Such actions typically have no chance of failure. However, so they are not considered combat actions. No matter the type of action attempted, it is up to the Castle Keeper to adjudicate how long any action takes and whether it can be performed in a single round. Most actions occur in a single round, or if they take longer, the rules for the specific action usually detail just how many rounds the action takes to complete. The Castle Keeper may allow more than one action per round under special circumstances. For example, if a character has a haste spell cast on them. Also, some non-combat actions a character may take might not consume a full round. This latter aspect is important, and the Castle Keeper must use common sense and reason to determine if an action takes a full round. Drawing a sword would not take a full round. Remember, it's 10 seconds in this game. Tossing someone an item may not take a full round. As a rule of thumb, simply think of how long such an action would take in real life. If it takes just a couple seconds to perform a non-combat action, then the character should be allowed another action, be it combat or non-combat in nature. The Castle Keeper can, and on occasion should, impose an initiative penalty for some of these actions. Movement in the combat round. Once initiative or surprise is determined, each character or monster involved in combat is allowed an action. One allowed action is movement. Movement, like the combat round, is an abstraction. It is a manner of establishing the distance that can be moved in a given period of time. Movement can be in a straight line, a curve, or around a corner. Base movement rates are listed in each racial or monster description. The listed rate is the distance in feet that can be moved in one combat round. If encumbered, movement is reduced, as described in the encumbrance section. Movement can be increased by jogging, which is double, or running, quadruple. Drop all fractions when figuring movement rates, minimum of 1 foot. To translate the movement rate into inches, hexes, or squares, divide the movement by 5. An attacker can move 1/2 their movement rate and still attack. No attack is allowed if a character exceeds 1/2 their movement rate. The only exception to this rule is when a charge is attempted. Charging allows for an attack and full movement, but the special rules for charging apply. The Castle Keeper has the option of reducing the movement rate due to terrain, obstacles, injuries, or other circumstances. Generally, the movement rate should not be reduced by more than 3/4. The Castle Keeper should always allow a character to move at least 5 feet in a combat round, unless the character is restrained or otherwise unable to move. Alright, so we have special movement, charging, absolutely in there. Melee combat rules, you hit each other until you fall down. Melee attack, like other combat round movement, is an abstraction. Though a character usually makes only one attack per round, it should not be considered a single swing. Melee attack involves a series of parries and thrusts, along with attack and defensive maneuvers that sometimes result in damage to the defender. The damage could be from one blow, or it could be representative of a series of blows, or fatigue. Many other bonuses and penalties may affect a melee attack to hit roll. Include but are not limited to racial modifiers, magic weapon bonuses, class ability modifiers, etc. Ranged combat based off of dex. Thrown and propelled. Thrown weapons depend on the strength of the character or monster throwing it. Propelled weapons are those whose momentum and thrust are dependent on the mechanism which propels them forward. This includes crossbows, stones from a sling, and similar devices. While a character's dexterity modifier is added to all ranged to hit rolls, a character's strength modifier is only added to the damage of thrown weapons, not propelled weapons. Ranged weapons also have range increments, and they have a maximum. All right, so yep, we have increments. You can read about the minutia of that. Unarmed combat rolls a d20, adds their bonus to hit, plus a strength modifier. So yeah, it's based off of strength here. Rules on grappling. Always in every single role-playing game, make sure you at least touch upon the rules of grappling. Grappling is it can be a very, I mean, pardon the pun, but it can be a very touchy subject because grappling can do fantastic and annoying things on both sides of the story being told, right? But that said, I want you to touch upon it. You can read through this. These are all the minutiae. Just like I'm not going to tonight. I'm not reading over all the different classes and all this. There are rules for these different things to happen. So situational things, cover, prone or blind. Talking about armor, how shields and helms and cover can add to AC in the ultimate calculations we make. So it's here. We're on 221. So if you're reading along at home, there you go. Yep. So here, there's a lot. You have a lot of different options here that you can do. Different keywords, things to consider. So make this as complicated and stack up all these abilities on your character as you want, or keep things simple and just play a boxer. Play a boxer. Disengagement. Narrative of combat. Thank you for enforcing. Combat should be the heroic struggle between good and evil, law and chaos. Combat pits the paladin against the lich, locks the knight in deadly struggle with the dragon, and aligns the wizard in magical opposition to abyssal creatures threatening the world. So this is, thank you for encouraging, not just, oh, I miss. Oh, I hit for 4 damage. Y'all, you can do better than that. And I hope that there are many of you. There's 44 of you watching. I hope that you do take up this extra step. I'm not skipping over this because it's unimportant. I want to make sure I'm hitting on any of the bigger rules and concepts. But yes, thank you. And always, always, always encourage yourself or your players to describe the spell, the hit, the miss, the damage, or whatever, right? Uh-oh. Rum bum 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 rum bum bum. Well, well, well. If it isn't good old-fashioned Cinderblock Sally, how you doing? What were you up to in your Dungeons and or Dragons stream? What do you consider as a skill check? Roval, a skill check here is an ability check. It's pretty straightforward. You don't need to worry. Well, because in D&D, like, well, there's nothing really for con, or strength only has these couple things. The system is refined down to ability checks, and the difficulty that you must meet or beat is determined by Well, ambient factors, just like it would in D&D. Bluejoy, absolutely agree. I agree with your statement there. It provides encouragement and inspiration, and it staves off the boredom or that kind of like, well, I missed, and then you get that itch where you want to reach over and you're like, I know it's not going to be my turn for like 3 more minutes, so. Mm-hmm. Oh. Oh, my turn again? Oh, I rolled a 1. I miss. Eh. Yeah, I'm gonna send you this meme. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Hope you didn't see that one. Because then you're creating the whirling combat, the narration, right? But thank you for the shout outs to our raiders, Cinder and friends. I hope you're doing well. Talking about hit points. Hit points for classes are acquired by level. At each level, a hit die type is rolled and added to the previous level's total. The Constitution modifier is added or subtracted. At 10th level and above, all classes acquire hit points at a specified rate. Constitution modifiers are added to or subtracted from this. In all cases, a character gains at least 1 hit point for each level advanced. Monster hit points are specified in the monster description. Monsters receive a number of hit die types for hit points. Some rolls are adjusted. For example, 3d6 indicates that 3 6-sided dice are rolled and added together for that monster's hit point total. 3d12 plus 4 indicates that 3 12-sided dice are rolled and 4 added to it. Temporary hit points. Some instances, such as with a Bard's Inspire ability, characters or monsters can gain temporary hit points. Temps are added to a character's current hit points. In combat, temporary hit points are the first to be reduced due to combat. That probably is very familiar to most, if not all of you, if you're here as a D&D player. Damage, healing, 0 hit points. We're on 224 if any of you are playing along at home. This is, I will read this because what do you do if you hit 0? This varies, like D&D edition to D&D edition and game to game. In general, when 0 hit points is reached, the character or monster passes out. They are not dead, but rather incapable of acting while passed out due to blood loss and physical or mental damage. The character or monster is unable to act and is unconscious or gravely wounded. Those so wounded, if still conscious, can do little more than crawl from the battlefield or call out for help. Those with 0 hit points recover consciousness in 1d6 hours, after which they can move at 1/2 their normal move rate, but still cannot participate in combat, cast spells, turn undead, or any strenuous or demanding action. The full effect of magical healing of characters reduced to 0 hit points is immediate. At -1 to -6, the character or monsters is rendered unconscious and grievously wounded. They require bed rest to recover. Unless magically healed, a character so wounded must rest 24 hours before the process of healing begins. With most magical healing, the character's hit points can only be returned to 0, after which healing proceeds normally. Example: a knight is struck by a club wielded by an Etten and reduced to -1 hit points. Before healing begins, the knight must wait 24 hours. However, a cleric of goodly intent decides to share the grace of their deity with the knight and cast a Cure Light Wounds on the knight. The cure is for 8 hit points, but the knight is only brought back up to 0 hit points. However, healing can proceed as normal thereafter. At -7 to -9, the character or monster is mortally wounded and loses 1 hit point per round after reaching -7 hit points. Aid administered to the wounds stops the hit point loss. This takes at least 1 full round, during which no hit point is lost. After 24 hours have passed, the normal healing process, as described for -1 to -6 hit points, begins. And at -10, to the stricken, death occurs immediately. Only resurrection, reincarnation, or bribes to the castle keeper can remedy death. James says, I'm not that experienced with CNC, but I do not like all classes having the same access to all skills. That makes it a game of averages, with expertise breaking bounding. I'd agree CNC did skills better. James says, I have a little bias from a lot of 3.5 and Pathfinder, though. Bluejoy says, that's kind of interesting because it makes falling during battle especially rough. It also makes clerics that much more valuable. Yeah, right? Because you can't just keep bouncing up into consciousness. You can be stabilized at 0, and then I hope you can do some sort of like medevac, or you gotta end the combat now. That leans into that more lethal sense of an OSR style game. Damage applied immediately. Different ways. Different ways of describing damage. Subdual damage. This type of damage is generally not fatal, though on occasion it can be. Subdual damage is more the bludgeoning one receives in a fist fight than the slashing, gnashing, bone-breaking combat of swords and maces. It may hurt and even knock one unconscious, but rarely draws blood and usually results in damage that heals quickly. Subdual damage is usually caused in unarmed combat with natural weapons. However, many monsters use natural weapons that cause normal damage. If a monster's attack causes subdual rather than normal damage, the monster description will note it. Otherwise, damage from monsters should be considered normal. A monk's unarmed attack is normal damage unless the monk chooses to subdue, as if using a weapon. An attacker can use weapons to deliver subdual damage, but it does so at varying rates. When being used for subdual, weapons inflict normal damage, but it is mostly temporary damage. Minimally, these weapons deliver 1 point of damage. All subdual damage delivers some normal damage. For every 5 points of subdual damage inflicted, 1 point is considered normal. Subdual damage heals faster than normal damage, as it is not usually fatal. It heals at a rate of 1 hit point per every 10 minutes. The normal damage inflicted as a part of subdual damage heals as previously described. At the Castle Keeper's discretion, when a character reaches -10 hit points or more of subdual damage, they have taken severe enough bludgeoning damage to an internal organ to cause death or permanent incapacitation. Otherwise, they should be considered unconscious for 24 hours and do not begin healing until gaining consciousness. Falling damage. Here's another spicy one between different systems. Fall from a height of 5 feet or more can be very deadly, and players should be made aware of the potential hazards of a fall prior to beginning a climb. If a character falls from a height of 6 to 10 feet, a dex check must be made. If the check is successful, the person falling takes no damage. If the check is not successful, the person takes 1d6. From heights greater than 10 feet, damage accrues significantly. For every 10 feet fallen, the number of d6 used for damage increases by 1. The damage for each 10 feet fallen is cumulative. All right. Liquid damage occurs when dangerous liquids strike and splash. Oil, acid. Okay, minutia we can read about. Oh, and now we're getting to the part on turning undead as a cleric. You want to come up and say hi to everyone? Come on. Right here. I got a lovely lap you can be in. Come on. No, you just want to claw at me? All right, well, it hurts. Please don't do that. You want to come up? I twiddled my fingers and everything. All right, well, turning undead and such. Again, that's very specific. It's for a particular thing here. Not going to worry about that. XP is XP as per XP, and if you don't want to use XP, as per the very first, the rule number 1 of this system, don't use it. You want to stick with milestones or do something? Go ahead. But this part talks about experience points. Different types of... this is more minutia. Not worried about that or like of this kind of a thing here. So overall, I think this conveyed that it's a pretty straightforward system. The siege engine is it's D20 based. It's simpler in some ways than what you might be used to with 5th edition. Like, there's no skills. It all goes back to straight up abilities. Some things are pared down. It's interesting to have an initiative you roll every round. A round is 10 seconds, and everyone rolls a d10, and you go in that order with maybe a bonus. And you know what? If you don't like that and you want it to be based off of decks like D&D, well, there's a point when how many rules from D&D do you want to import into C&C before you say we should just be playing D&D again? But nothing is stopping you in this book. In fact, you all are encouraged to say, you know what? I want my own system. I don't like rolling a D10 every round to see who acts, and we're going to make it based off of decks. Or you make it based off of Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which is mostly perception, but if it's really based on an appropriate skill, then everyone just rolls that skill instead for the initiative in ways to act. And I think in that way, James, by taking initiative off of dexterity, except as a tiebreaker, it does reduce the power of initiative from being an end-all, be-all to things. Oh, and this is the example of play. This might be a fun thing to narrate. Maybe I'll narrate this in tomorrow's broadcast so we can get the swirling action in a play-by-play. Because look, we're already at the end of the book, everyone. We did it. We went over the rules. Nothing was particularly complex. Everything is described here. This might be a lot of fun to pick up. Maybe try out on the channel at some point. I don't know if any of you wanted to play a sample adventure of Castles and Crusades. Maybe I could run something. I do have Shadows of the Halfling Hall. So maybe I can actually run something if there's a couple of you out there who want to give Castles and Crusades a try. And we can try running this adventure, Shadow of the Halfling Hall. But I suppose that depends on your all's interest out there. Of course, that would also be a... Oops. You got to be on our Discord for it, because we use that for our voice chat, right? So for the classes, there are things that only classes should do, but you're not required to keep it within it. It's just you can't add your level if it's an out of class thing that you're trying. Doop-a-doop. Let's go over here. That. Let's go over here. Let's go over here. Here, jump up. Come on. Ah, hi. So, for example, here's the barbarian that we took a look at here. A barbarian ability to intimidate, -2 to one opponent's combat rolls, attribute check, and saves. That is based off of Constitution. Now, a fighter, unless the fighter also has Intimidate, a fighter could use Intimidate, but the fighter wouldn't get to add class level to the roll. And we see Intimidate go up to a -2. Here at level 4, we have a Whirlwind attack, attack 2 opponents of up to half the barbarian's level. So we see that the prime attribute for a barbarian is Constitution, and there are things that just a barbarian can do here. Here we have Ancestral Calling at level 10. And this doesn't require a check, but this is a particular skill that a barbarian has. Let's take a look at... Here's a Bard. Bard is off of Charisma here. And so you can get Exalt. Inspire companions by Exaltation. +2 to any one attribute check. So you would need to check your Charisma, and there you go. I can just hear the horn. That's awesome. So yes, there are things that a class just natively or intrinsically does, and could possibly be used by another character in a particular circumstance, but wouldn't be as good about it. And so it's left open, but it's encouraged to let everyone's profession as their class really carry them forward and perhaps help them stand out even more. Here we get into a caster here with our cleric spells and the other abilities that you get. And we'll look at this stuff. We'll look at this stuff later as well. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself and then bog down in all the details of the many different classes in C&C.